Welcome to another episode of the speakEZ podcast powered by HireEZ and the Recruiting Academy. I have the pleasure of bringing on one of the legends in sourcing and recruiting. If you've ever been to a conference, he's there on stage and making impacts. Brian Fink, welcome to the podcast.
Dan, you are too kind. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for those kind words. When I think about the impact, I don't think that I make nearly as much as impact as other people have made in my career. People that are friends of the show, people who are friends of the community, like Steve Levy or Shannon herself or Jerry Crispin. So I'm really blessed that I get to do what I do, and then I get to do it with the zeal and zest of that other people have kind of sprinkled on me. Oh, look at that. I made myself sound like a bagel or a cinnamon roll, right? That's good.
Love it. Well, right now you're the managing partner at Rework Group. Help me understand what that is, what you got cooking in the lab, and share with the audience what you're doing right now.
So it's real simple. My philosophy in recruiting has always been that I take organizations and individuals from better to best. And the rework group gives me the ability to be unleashed and work with multiple companies at the same time. Typically, I'm working with organizations that are 40 to 400 people, working with them with everything for executive search, but also working with their managers to design hiring rubrics, what that needs to look like, what they need to do to scale. I'm not playing HR. That's not my game. That's not my bag. What I'm trying to do with them is help them to design what a job description looks like and what job outcomes look like, and how they can marry those outcomes to the questions they ask in the interview process so that it doesn't devolve into a game of liar's poker or poker's liar or something pyre. But it's all good.
Love it. What's something that you're working with your clients, you're seeing on an everyday basis? What are recruiters doing right now? They're still doing it manually that they were doing it 15, 10, 5 years ago. And that's hurting kind of the results. What are they doing manually and
We're waiting for hiring
what are
manager
teams doing
feedback.
stuck in the past? What's
Dude,
that?
we're waiting for hiring manager feedback. Is that
Okay.
you and I are both Amazonian, right? So that is one of the
Yes.
things that Dan and I can talk about. And as we're talking about being Amazonian, our hearts go out to the Amazonians who were let go via a layoff or a riff just a few days ago as we're recording this. Our heart really goes out to them about that. There was a system at Amazon. If you remember it, it was the 2 and 5 promise. And the 2 and 5 promise is dynamic because it says to Mr. Candidate, you will hear from me within 2 days of an interview. You will hear with me in 5 days of a final interview, which means that managers knew when they had to put all their information together, when they had to have the huddle and things of that nature. Hiring managers are dragging things out. We still live in an economy where peak talent, that top 1%, everybody says they want it, but are they motivated enough to actually go through the process and deliver that feedback within 48 hours? Are they instantly huddling, or are they meandering through decisions saying, you know what? It's a soft job market. We can look for another person. If they're busy looking for another person, they don't know the problem that they need to solve. And if they can't solve that problem, it is going to impact EBITDA. It's going to impact the bottom line. It's going to impact software development. It'll impact sales. And the list just goes on and on. It's like watching a bunch of dominoes fall.
I think one of the biggest things that recruiting is changing is something that you're teaching companies right now and recruiters and recruiting teams to do it is be that impact and be that person that influences the decision making. So when you're going into those debriefs, it's not saying, "What do you think? Perfect. I'll go work on getting more candidates." It's why or why not isn't this person a fit? Why is it? And stand up for that candidate specifically and negotiate with that hiring team of how can we set this person up that we just interviewed, spent 5 hours of their time of why can't we deliver this offer versus you know the other way around of like opting them out versus opting them in. I think we handle that
That's a good
in a
point.
way different way. Help me understand kind of how you're teaching people to do that.
So actually, you talk about the debrief, right? And there's a lot of emphasis on the debrief, and I don't want to take anything away from it. I've written 2 books that talk about the debrief. What about the pre-brief? What about
Sure.
the huddle that you have when you are opening the requisition and you are talking about what the interview loop is going to look like? What is the process going to look like? Who's going to ask questions about culture? Who's going to ask questions about whether or not this accountant can or cannot do the job? Who's going to be the person that asks the question about whether or not, and how they're going to ask that question about whether or not this person can code or understand systems design? Let's talk about all that up front. So when we're going through the interview process, we're not slowing ourselves down with these little encumbrances. It's like there's an old adage that is linked to Abraham Lincoln, is that if he had to chop down a tree and he was given a certain amount of time, he would spend all his time sharpening his axe so that he could knock the tree down with one fatal blow. Again, I don't know, like my maratonic history is not what it used to be. Um, why aren't we investing all this time up front? Why are we skipping or condensing a hiring manager huddle or a kickoff meeting to 30 minutes where the recruiter is put in a situation or circumstance where they simply can do nothing but effecate to or uh not, they succumb to being an order taker, right? And they don't have that determination to stand up and say, "Hey, what questions are you going to ask? What is the mission here? How are we going to deliver on that? Why can't somebody on this team do this today?" And really push back and have that tug and pull in the pre-brief instead of in the debrief.
And half of it too is having the relationship with that hire manager of saying, "Hey, going into this debrief, you might have XYZ on the hiring team saying this. Let's have a conversation of how we're going to rebuttal on why this person would be a fit when they bring up that concern." And having that conversation with the hiring manager, if you don't fill this role, you might lose that head count. So if it's a candidate that you're willing to go to bat for, make sure that at bat is worth it and making sure that you're prepared with the answers to have within that debrief. But it doesn't happen if you don't have a pre-brief. Debriefs don't happen well if you don't have that pre-brief.
Right, so you've got to have a meaningful kickoff, and I beat up on the 30-minute thing because I always heard you need 30 minutes to have a kickoff meeting. No, you need to have like 30, 45 minutes. You need to have some ad nauseum emails. I'm not trying to create work for the sake of work, but you really need to understand what is going into this role. What is the rationale for why they are hiring? What are going to be those outcomes, right? And so that everybody understands how they can deliver, because recruiters, we're yes people, right? We want to say yes to the candidate. We want to say yes to the hiring manager. I would say if you surveyed 100 recruiters, 100 recruiters would tell you they love to make placements, right? Well, if you love to make placements so much, why don't you gather all this information up front, so when you speak to people you're more calculated, and you're more precise, and that when you're handing out fewer no's or you're elevating more silver medalists. Dan, I'd love to hear what you have to think, what you think about that, because you talk to recruiters day in and day out, and you've been in the trenches like I have at Amazon, at AWS, at Meta. What are your thoughts on this?
I think we don't slow down and realize how to hire the right people. You know, we're so worried about a process. In my early on career, I was so worried about how many hires do I get? What's my time to fill? All these different metrics and how many interviews I have and the recruiting funnel, which is fundamentally works out from a structure standpoint. However, the conversion rates within those specific areas are where we're lacking because we're not putting the effort and the time to even prep our candidates anymore because there is an ATS and CRM full of them that I can just get another one. Or if there's a lot of applicants coming through and there's a lot of people on the job market, I'm not going to spend enough time with these people that are later in the stages because I can just go fill up the well pretty quickly again. I How I recruited was I spent more time on the front end and preparing those candidates going into those conversations. Maybe recruiter A and recruiter B, I had maybe 5 interviews in the loop. The other person had 20 candidates in the loop.
Yeah.
But my percentages were higher because I prepped them going into those conversations and I knew their strengths, their weaknesses ahead of time so then I can prep everybody else that is involved going into those
You
conversations.
know, I think that you hit on something is that I think hiring managers do think in terms of business impact. I don't think they care about sourcing funnels. I think instead of saying something like, we've got 50 applicants, if you say something like, we got 5 candidates who increased velocity by 20% in the next quarter, that you've really made a tremendous impact, right? You know, I think that if Jerry was on this call, or maybe Domdowski is that or Godomsky, if they were on this call, they would be having a conversation with us about time to fill versus time to impact, candidate quality versus business performance, offer acceptance versus team productivity, because I think so many times we lose the ability to align outcomes, right? And I think that when you align outcomes, you move from being seen as a recruiter to being seen as a partner in growth. And you know, shout out to Michael Goldberg. He's somebody who's really kind of hit that home with me. So, Michael, if you're listening, I think the fact that you have talked about this and talking about earning credibility through data, um, I think that's awesome. I really appreciate it because ultimately trust is earned with receipts.
I think
And
going off those receipts, we're a part of the age where information is easily to our fingertips, right? And it's not about how we're gathering all the information now, it's how are you utilizing that information, especially obviously with drift campaigns back in the day to, now we have automation and AI can do all our outreach for us and measuring all of the success metrics from that campaign, whether it's open rate, reply rate, whatever it may be. But also don't just say, oh, I have a great open rate. I have a great reply rate. The biggest metric I see, and I tell leaders right now, it's not your reply rate. Are you measuring your team success of when they do reply? And how long does it take for your recruiter to set up that next step with them?
ooh, that's hot. That's hot.
So, what percentages of, hey, I got a reply, and then we say, okay, we got to go source 10 other more candidates, 100 more candidates, and get back in the system to refill the well when you got a reply. And that's the first thing that you should do. If I was a TA leader with all this automation, all this AI, all the systems giving me the analytics, I'm looking at when you do get a reply, what percentages of my recruiters are replying back to that candidate and getting them into the next stage? It should be immediately.
That's powerful. You know, when you started the conversation, I thought, and I know I'm name dropping here, but like these are people that Dan and I talk to all the time. Is that I always thought you were going to talk about competitive intelligence, like how Aaron Matthew presented on that
Yeah.
at RecFest, right? Like asking questions, using the data to jump in and say, our two top competitors are hiring for the same role at like $15,000 more. Do we want to adjust comp or do we want to adjust our timeline, and offering those kind of variances? That intelligence. And I'm gonna talk about this, for a minute about HireEZ, is that one of the things that HireEZ does inside the platform, and I was talking to Mike the other day about it, your director of sales, is that the best talent exists in different niche communities, and HireEZ, much like LinkedIn, has the ability to understand if it's concentrated in Austin or if it's concentrated in Toronto, so that you can figure out if you're going to go remote, or if you're going to require in office, and how that impacts fill times. And I really that's one of the advantages that you have being a data backed recruiter, because it earns you a seat at the strategy table, not the recruiting table, not the kiddie pool, not the table that they stuck you at Thanksgiving with all the kids in the other room, but it earns you a seat at the table about what it takes to impact the business.
Love it. All right, you are speaking November 19th at For Recruiters by Recruiters, the 100% free virtual conference powered by HireEZ. You are kicking us off 12 p.m. Central Time, November 19th. Your title is Under Pressure: how
Under
to
pressure.
rock at modern recruiting. Like, help me understand, why did you pick that topic? What are you going to be talking about? And why people should come see you?
Okay, one, I did not volunteer for this. I was volunteered by the community. So that's one. Two, about the topic is that there were a number of topics that the community suggested that they want somebody to speak on. I took on this one because we live in an era of change, and I want to kind of explain to people a little bit as to how I time manage and time block myself as being that solopreneur and being that individual who's been both corporate recruiter and independent recruiter, so that I can offer that dialogue under pressure. When I saw the fact that somebody wanted to talk about, or wanted us to talk about, how recruiters are being asked to do more with less, I immediately thought about David Bowie's Under Pressure, right? David Bowie and Queen, when they did Under Pressure. And I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about the one of the lyrics in the song talks about, I yell and my friends get me out. Well, that's what FRBR is all about. It's about a community of friends. It's about a community of recruiters who are here, that when somebody screams, get me out, we're there to pitch in. We're there to lend a hand. We're there to help them raise the bar, to borrow another Amazonian phrase, but somebody to really raise up the community. And that's why I took on the title. That's why I'm making it all about music. I'm jamming in a little bit of Beastie Boys, a little bit of Lady Gaga, getting all that together for us so that we can have a big time, so that we can talk about these big topics about the pressure of filling a requisition, about how we co-create with hiring managers, how we don't just take requisitions, how we communicate proactively, how we understand the pressure, right? Because hiring managers, take it back to what Dan started with, hiring managers are juggling headcount, deliverables, and internal politics. One of the other things that we got to talk about, and I talk about these four core values of being a recruiter: curiosity, empathy, tenacity, and mischievousness. I want to focus on that word empathy. Is that sometimes we don't have empathy for our hiring managers. Sometimes they don't have empathy for us. Well, using these four core variables, we're going to have this conversation about how we can celebrate the win together. Not that we just closed a rec, not that we just closed the loop, but how we optimize for the next one. That's what my talk is about.
Love it, love it. Obviously, hopefully, you have some Garth Brooks in there. We have some friends in low places, and I think that's where we're at in the recruiting community. A ton of layoffs, like we said. We both worked at Amazon. We feel for them, Target, all these other ones. What would advice, as we wrap up, would you give somebody that maybe has been impacted, or maybe they're feeling that survivor's guilt right now? And there's just a ton of feels that we have, or in a situation where maybe you didn't get laid off, but then you have PTSD of when is my turn. Give me your, raw.
All right, man, that is a lot, because like you say that, and I think about, my time at Twitter. When I was at Twitter, we went through 3 rounds of layoffs and what have you before I decided to exit the organization. And the after the first layoff, and when the second layoff came, I wanted it to be me, because I felt like I just felt like my work was completely undermined, in some form or fashion. Um, I would, yeah, I definitely. Why is Steve Levy calling me right now? That's funny. Steve Levy was calling me right now. Uh, I think that when you get laid off, it gives you. I mean, look, layoffs suck. There is absolutely no sugarcoating it. It's a gut punch. It's the email that you never wanted to get. It's done in an ingenuous fashion. Uh, just remember that it wasn't something that you did. It was a decision somebody made with a spreadsheet, and it's your opportunity to really redefine who you are, because the layoff didn't take your success. It merely took an illusion of what you thought success looked like, and it opened up your eyes to a new opportunity.
Love it. Love it. The job is not part of your identity. Your identity is rooted in so much more. And one of those is relationships. So if you want to continue the relationships with all these people in this industry, come to FRBR November 19th. Brian's going to have an amazing session, and having those people around you to support you and encourage you every step of the way is what this community is built for. As we
About
wrap
this
up, any
community.
last minute?
Okay, I got a favor. I got a favor. Listen, if you're listening to this talk, if you're watching this talk, that's great. But if you don't show up for FRBR, if you're not one of the 2,000 people that are in the room, listening to this conversation will not help you.
Love it. Love it.
That's what I got.
Well, if you want to connect with Brian, shoot him a LinkedIn message. I'm sure you and 50,000 other followers see his work every single day on social media. If you're looking for a talent strategy, somebody that can come in, rework the nature of your business and the pain points, Brian's your guy. He's the managing partner at the Rework Group, and it's a pleasure chatting with you, Brian. If you want more information about HireEZ, feel free to hireez.com or shoot me a link on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow the podcast and all the other things that this community is bringing to you. Again, thank you so much.
Rock on.
The future of talent acquisition isn't coming. It's already here. See for yourself at hireez.com.